Japan in World War I, the untold story. When you think of World War I, what comes to mind? The battlefields in France, the battlefields of Gallipoli, the Russian Revolution? But what if I told you there was a major player whose story is often left in the footnotes? A nation that saw the Great War not just as a global catastrophe, but as a golden opportunity. Today, we're uncovering the untold story of Japan in World War I. Most people are surprised to learn that Japan was even in the war. But not only was Japan a participant, it was a crucial member of the Allied powers, fighting alongside Britain, France, and Russia. So how did this happen? Let's rewind to 1914. The world is a chessboard of alliances. One of the most important, yet often overlooked, was the Anglo-Japanese alliance, signed back in 1902. This pact was a game-changer. It basically said, if one of us gets into a war with more than one country, the other has to help out. So when Britain declared war on Germany in August 1914, the gears started turning. Britain, needing to protect its vast colonial interests in Asia and the Pacific, formally asked Japan for help. Now, Japan could have just provided naval support, but its leaders saw a much bigger prize. They saw a chance to expand their own influence in Asia, while the European powers were busy tearing each other apart. On August 23, 1914, Japan declared war on Germany. But their target wasn't Berlin. It was Tsingtao, a German colonial port on China's Shandong Peninsula. Think of it as a German fortress right in Japan's backyard. The Siege of Tsingtao was Japan's main military operation of the war. Teaming up with a small British force, the Japanese Army and Navy launched a full-scale assault. The battle wasn't easy. The Germans had built formidable defenses, and the fighting was intense. But after a 2-month siege, the German garrison surrendered. Japan had successfully kicked Germany out of Asia. This victory was a huge boost to Japan's national pride and military prestige. They had proven they could take on a major European power and win. But this was just the beginning of their ambitions. With Germany's colony now under its control, Japan turned its attention to China itself in early 1915. The Japanese government presented the Chinese government with a secret list of demands. These became known as the infamous 21 demands. They were designed to essentially turn China into a Japanese protectorate. The demands included things like taking over German economic rights in Shandong, extending leases on territory in Manchuria, and even placing Japanese advisors in key Chinese government positions. This was a massive overreach. China, too weak to resist completely, was forced to accept some of the demands. This act sparked a wave of anti-Japanese nationalism across China and made the other Allied powers, especially the United States, very nervous. They were beginning to see Japan not just as an ally, but as a rival for power in the Pacific. Japan was playing a long game, and the war in Europe was the perfect cover. While the army was busy in China, the Imperial Japanese Navy was also making its mark. Their primary role was to hunt down German naval raiders in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, securing vital shipping lanes for the Allies. They escorted troop ships carrying soldiers from Australia and New Zealand, the famous Anzacs, to the Middle East. It's a little-known fact that the safety of these iconic soldiers was, for a time, in the hands of the Japanese fleet. But Japan's most surprising naval contribution happened thousands of miles away, in the Mediterranean Sea. In 1917, at Britain's urgent request, Japan sent a destroyer squadron to help combat German and Austro-Hungarian submarines that were wreaking havoc on Allied shipping stationed in Malta. The Japanese destroyers escorted convoys and rescued sailors from torpedoed ships. They became known for their skill and efficiency, earning the respect of their European allies. It's a surreal image, isn't it? Japanese warships, flying the rising sun flag, sailing the ancient waters of the Mediterranean, fighting a European war. So while Europe bled, what was happening back home in Japan? The economy was booming. Before the war, Japan was a debtor nation. But with the European powers focused on producing munitions, their industries couldn't meet global demand for everyday goods. Japan stepped into the void. Its factories went into overdrive, producing everything from textiles to chemicals. Suddenly, Made in Japan was a label seen around the world. This wartime boom transformed the country. Shipbuilding, steel production, and heavy industry exploded. For the first time in its history, Japan became a creditor nation, lending money to its European allies. This new economic muscle gave Japan an unprecedented level of international clout. The war was, in purely economic terms, the best thing that could have happened to them. Finally, in 1918, the war ended. The world gathered in Paris to hammer out a peace treaty. For Japan, the Paris Peace Conference was their moment to step onto the world stage as a true global power. Their delegation was led by the respected statesman Saionji Kinmochi. They had three main goals. First, to hold on to the former German territories they had captured in China and the Pacific. Second, to be officially recognized as one of the big five powers alongside the US, Britain, France, and Italy. The third, a goal that would have profound consequences. They wanted a racial equality clause inserted into the covenant of the new League of Nations. This clause was simple. It called for the equal treatment of all people, regardless of race or nationality. For Japan, a non-white nation that had faced decades of racist policies from the West, this was deeply important. It was a matter of national honor. And amazingly, the proposal won a majority vote at the conference. But there was a catch. The conference chairman, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, declared that such a sensitive issue required a unanimous vote. Australia and Britain, fearing it would challenge their white Australia and other colonial policies, were strongly opposed. Wilson, siding with them, rejected the proposal. This rejection was a bitter humiliation for Japan. It fought alongside the Allies, contributed to the victory, and proved themselves to be a modern, powerful nation. Yet at the moment of triumph, they were told they were still not equal in the eyes of the West. This moment is crucial. Many historians argue that the failure of the racial equality clause was a major turning point. It fueled resentment and nationalism within Japan, pushing the country further towards militarism and the belief that they could only rely on their own strength to secure their place in the world. Despite this setback, Japan did achieve its other goals. They were granted a permanent seat on the Council of the League of Nations and were allowed to keep the German islands in the Pacific as mandates. However, the issue of Shandong in China was highly contentious and ultimately laid the groundwork for future conflict. So, when we look back, Japan's experience in World War I is a complex and fascinating story of ambition, opportunity, and disillusionment. They entered the war as a regional power and emerged as a global player, expanded their empire, supercharged their economy, and secured a seat at the top table of international politics. But they also faced a wall of racial prejudice that left a deep and lasting scar, arguably setting them on a different, more dangerous path that would lead to the Second World War. The Great War wasn't just a European story. Shockwaves were felt across the globe, and nowhere more profoundly than in the Empire of Japan. Thanks for watching. If you found this hidden history as fascinating as I did, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the untold stories of the past. Let me know in the comments what other forgotten parts of history you'd like to see covered. See you next time.